fast. All right, well, we will, hopefully Ian will join us at this point. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is 9:34. I apologize for starting late. Unfortunately, we do not have a quorum present. So the work that we will do today, we will work towards, you know, just doing our discussion pieces, but we won't be able to take any formal actions unless we have additional members show up to produce quorum. So with that, we are going to not establish quorum. I don't see any public comment. Is there anybody online that is here for public comment purposes? Seeing none, we will have to table the approval of the August 25th meeting minutes and come back to that if we do achieve quorum. If not, that will be pushed to our next meeting agenda. We also were to elect a chair and vice chair. Without quorum, we won't be able to officially do that, but I will put on the table if there are, is there anybody who would like to express interest in the chair and vice chair role. Currently, obviously, I am chair and Elizabeth is vice chair. That has been established since inception. We are happy to pass the baton. I think we're happy to persist if that's what's needed, but very much looking for anybody who might want to be a part of the leadership team.
Because she's so good at it.
Well, so I'm going to start being really bad and pissing everybody off. Great. Mercedes, anything from your perspective on the chair and vice chair? I'll take that as none.
I keep fighting with my mute button. I didn't do that on purpose, like crickets. You know what? I already serve on 2 boards, but if you guys need some, I could help out with the vice chair role, I guess. If you guys are really passing on batons.
No, I'm fine. She would take vice chair if she wanted. Oh, okay. I think we're okay. So what we'll do is we will ask staff to, well, obviously the roles will continue until said time is changed. Elizabeth and I are happy to do that. Elizabeth, yes. Yeah. And we'll put this back on the agenda for next time. If there's any changes to that, we will vote on it at the next meeting.
Remind me how long terms are. I know we had to reapply like a year or 2 ago to be on the commission.
There were 3 years. They're 3-year terms. Okay, fine. And
so 2 more years.
And the bylaws, all they specify, they don't have a time limit for chair and vice chair. It's just the first meeting of the year, which is this. There, you know, it needs to be
reconstituted.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the arts and economic prosperity AEP 6 results.
Okay. I wanted. It took us 2 years. We did an economic impact study with Americans for the Arts. We did the same thing back in 2017. The results were released in early October, and a week after they were released, we had the Vice President of Research for Americans for the Arts here doing a presentation at the Tampa Theater. We invited all the arts organizations in the community. Commissioner Hagan was there. Commissioner Kemp was there. We had a good representation of all the arts organizations. And we just wanted to summarize for you and what we put in here, sort of the results that came from the study as far as total industry expenditures. And this is just the nonprofit arts and cultural sector. But total industry expenditures, a little over $387 million. And then you can see the personal income tax paid, local tax revenue, and total event-related expenditures. So it shows clearly, and the full report you can find on our website, and we're going to publish an edition that we can then hand out at a future board meeting. But it's very interesting compared to other communities our size. We are above the average for population size. It also breaks it down into how many employees, all of the arts, it aggregates the information from everyone. So it's very good to have. They've done this. It's the 6th time they've done it. They typically do it every 5 years. And we have been a study partner the past 2 years. But because of the pandemic, they went a little bit further out. And other communities, Pinellas County did the same study. So we can sort of see ourselves related to counties around us. But nationally, we were above other population areas. So it's good information, and we had a really good turnout. And so we just wanted to share. We'll be sharing with the Arts Council Board. We wanted to share with you all because this affects everything we're all doing. And it's really interesting to see what an impact they not only measure the actual expenditures of the organizations, they fill out a study expenditures and audiences, but there are questionnaires that are given out to audience members in the first year of the study that ask, did you eat dinner? How much did you spend on it? Did you get a hotel room? Did you park your car? All those kind of related spending things. And it also breaks it down, has questions like, if this event wasn't happening, would you have gone to an event someplace else? And the answers were pretty much, well, if it wasn't happening in Hillsborough County, yeah, I'd go over to Pinellas County to see something. So
that was my question. This is Hillsborough compared to all their Florida counties. What's the index?
Yeah, this is just Hillsborough County.
Just Hillsborough. Well, when you say we're higher than.
There is a line where it says compared to other, what the median is for other similar sized population groups.
Got it. Okay.
And that's where we, so it's not broken down. But this is national. They had 389 study partners. So there is national data available, but this is just Hillsborough County. We also will be getting MSA data for the combined Hillsborough and Pinellas, because Americans for the Arts considers us to be the study partner for the MSA as well as just Hillsborough County. So, but that's on our website and we will be publishing it, but I just wanted to give you all an update.
Do you want me to go into this, or?
I think that's probably, we just need an overview.
Yeah, let me ask a quick question. So the MSA, when will the timeline of that be available?
It's ready now.
I mean, I've been told earlier this week that it was dropped in my box, but I haven't gone and retrieved.
So we've got our Hillsborough Board and the MSA will become simultaneously available. And this is what I'm asking is I'm putting my public relations hat on, and from a messaging standpoint, again, making sure that the inherent value and the ROI of what we're doing. So our investments that we're making into the community with this program are intrinsically, aligned with what those outcomes are, right? So my question to you, the team, is from a staff perspective, Commissioner Hagan was in attendance, but there was many of us who could not make it, and I'm really bummed because I love going to Tampa Theater. But what is our communication strategy? How do we then take this out beyond our internal stakeholder groups and share this broader? How do we make sure that this is being sent out to our state elected officials that are in our Hillsborough delegation? How are we making sure that all county commissioners have set their eyes on it? How are we making sure that those other stakeholders are aware that you have done this work, you are a study partner, this is data-driven, kind of outcome, and then we have the MSA to show the benchmark piece. What conversations are we having around that?
So typically when we get the published version, that is our legislative tool, and we mail that to, and when we make visits, legislative visits for arts advocacy, we utilize that and provide it to the legislators. The Atlanta Business Chronicle is working with county communications to do some more stories on it. We have to clear everything with county communications regarding PR, and Eileen is our connection for that.
The Tampa Bay Business Journal is not doing the story. They've already kind of been communicated with and decided they're not going on that route. So just
okay, they did inquire, but
they inquire. So questions. I love that you mail the report out, but as you know, kind of in this day and age, not everyone takes the time. The people get a lot of reports. Are you able? Is there
there's a summary that
even though they're like the top 3 or 4 bullet points, or those things that like we should be armed with as we're out in the community, or they can be put on the website or something. Just a quick snapshot of how our world works.
Yeah. We live in one-pagers.
Yeah. Talking points.
Yep.
Yeah. We do typically, and we use those again with elected officials. but we can, I think we've done a pretty good job of communicating all of this, certainly to the organizations, but we probably need to do a better job in just the general public, and the communications department has done a good job of reaching out. It's just, it's amazing. In 2017, when we did this, I had just started the job, and where I had been working, this was front page of the newspaper, and it was not here. So we've got some work to do here. But the reason, the MSA, we now have a regional arts group that meets, that has Creative Pinellas and the Arts Council and Tampa Bay Businesses for Culture and the Arts, is both counties. And at the last meeting, they were very interested in getting that MSA information and broadcasting it to their constituents of the St. Petersburg Arts Alliance is part of that. Tampa Arts Alliance. So,
and I'm not so much, my thought process isn't because what I do for my day job, right? So government affairs and knowing kind of changes that we've seen in the dialogue around not-for-profit funding and how that then impacts and is directly, impactful to cultural arts and cultural asset funding. Again, if we've got good data, good story, it shows that ROI. I just want to make sure that because we are not going to lobby our maker, but we definitely want to make sure they're informed about the work that we're doing.
Right. So. I think we're doing that in county communications, is assisting. And once we get the published version, everybody wants a copy of that. They may not read it all, but it's very easily accessible. So that would be good.
Perhaps add what we've already done, just so that to help the conversation a little bit.
Sure.
So we did send out a news release. We did do a newsroom story. The 4 bullet points that I put into this are kind of the bullet points that fit into that story to highlight things like Martine was mentioning that we're about 40% over the national average when it comes to attendees spending money on our art. And other little different things like that in the story. Mentioned that like we're actually doing better than some other places in the country at the income we're getting. There's about $11.2 million in tax revenue. We tried to highlight that a little bit. We did do social with some of these snippets about kind of the facts that I'm giving you right now as well. So there has been some work with communications to kind of get this out into the general public and make sure people know that it exists and like what was good about it from the data that we collected. And then Martine also mentioned we're kind of working on the next leg, which is getting this published. So I've already been in touch with like our graphic designer who did this last time so that we can kind of start working on that angle. And then like she said, we can send it out to everyone and make sure.
Those snippets that you just talked about, can you share that with the board?
Yeah,
it can stay out to the public. I'm not sure I'm not subscribed to those public channels.
And then we can amplify it.
Right. Yeah. I feel happy to like share it on social and how they did that. But so that's where we are now, and we did get a little bit of a bite on the Business Journal, but ultimately we decided not to do that story, and Kathy actually helped put it into Osprey Observer. So we've gotten a little bit of media, but not like a ton.
Right. Those can be things where I think we can help you, like think about like it's how is the story, maybe the story that was pitched, there could be another angle to it or something. There could be another way of thinking about it that could tie to a bigger message that then maybe the Business Journal would be interested in.
Yeah.
And we have, like, for example, so my firm, although we're government affairs, we do media relations. I have all those relationships too. So to the extent that within my role here, we can take that, amplify it. I would want to do that because that then when I have to go testify in front of the county commission as the board chair and thank them for the funding that they do give us and hope that we can persist, that data and that story and having those warm touches with that data is going to be really useful to us as a team.
Yeah, and there's some good social metrics that came out of the study as well about how people just care about this and it has broad public support even if people don't attend an institution. So I thought that was very interesting as well.
I'd love to see all that. Yeah, I'm a big data. I don't like too much data. I like just enough to like.
And Ian, I think you had a comment. I'm sorry.
So I know like our city comms team is always looking for content because you've got to post stuff all day and it's really hard. And what I found, like, so today's World AIDS Day, I was able to go to the World AIDS Day site. They have a media toolkit with like all of the images for each of the different platforms that I was basically able to ask our comms team, hey, can you help? Like, we participate in this, we're Fast Track City, can you guys push this out there? And because all of that's available already, and it might just be a graphic with a statistic, right? It's just really easy for them to do, so it's not a heavy lift. You're not asking them to do too much. But the other thing, I think this is maybe another angle to get attention, because I think also like the local TV stations get a ton of exposure, and they're also always looking for content. Is like there's got to be some day, like a day to sell, like an arts celebration day or an arts awareness day, something like that. And if there's like a day that has a color attached to it, it's like we're also always looking for different colors to light up all of our bridges in Old City Hall. And sometimes just lighting up Old City Hall a color for, like, it's funny because there's certain colors that seems that are used for a lot of different things, so don't use red. But we've got like TV stations to do stories about whatever issue it is because Old City Hall's lit up this color. There's probably like 5 or 6 stories about Old City Hall being lit up a color a year. So I think having the toolkit ready is good. And then also beyond that, like you think of these other organizations that have a ton of social media traffic, like the airport. Like if there's the airport and Visit Tampa Bay, if there's a tourism component, like the economic impact related to tourism. I know like the orchestra buys a ton of ads in the baggage claim area at the airport. If there's, I mean, so just creating a toolkit for that, because the airport posts something and they get 3,000 likes within like an hour. So it's just like a way to kind of get it out there from different angles.
Yeah. There is tourism. Yeah. Well, and I represent the Tampa Bay, so I know there absolutely is. So
like throw that stat on like an Instagrammable thing and just ask them to share it.
Yeah, and it might be of special interest to you that we also have the data aggregated for City of Tampa.
That's very interesting.
This is the Tampa Arts Alliance coordinating with us as the study partner. When we started research, they expressed an interest and they bought, paid so that we could have the data aggregated. Okay. It was a small sum and they were really wanting that. So the majority of the arts organizations are in Tampa. Yeah. So it's, but if you want the data just aggregate, we can get that to you.
Yeah, for me, it's just because I'm not on the comm side, but I ask them for a lot and it's usually just easier for them if I turn it over. They'll post it.
So the message is we want to help you amplify, help us help you get the data out there and get the message and talking points, proliferate.
We're excited to
And just like quickly, not to extend this, but also like one statistic could be one image. You could send 5 different images.
So what we will keep you guys informed. We will give you more data since Elizabeth is hungry. More data. We've got lots of data, so we can send it to you MSA as long as we can send you the City of Tampa as well as enforcement. Okay. So, but we really wanted you all to be aware because I think this is a good news story coming after the pandemic, after what our cultural organizations have gone through. They needed a good news story, and I thought its timing was really good.
We'll circle back on that. So the next update is on the status of the 24 grants under the.
And I just wanted, of course, you're mostly interested in the special event partnership grants. They were approved by the Board of County Commission with no issues, which was great. And we got the grant agreements out and we have most of the grant agreements back. We have a couple that are having a hard time getting all the information that we need. I do want you to be aware that the Tampa Caribbean Festival, which was voted to be funded, is getting flagged funding from a county commissioner. I believe it's Commissioner Myers. Okay. So the county looks at all of the grants through the Arts Council. If someone is getting money through another source, then we can't. Okay? So that was the deal on that one. But we're just lacking 2 grant agreements at this point, and we're already processing reimbursements. So that pretty much covers cultural assets. And
I assume that on that project, for example, the flag must be a greater amount than what we were granting, and that's why they opted for that.
Yes.
Okay.
And is that annual for them, or will they be back to us? There was a one-time.
No, they're usually not reoccurring. Yeah, so in all likelihood, unless you chooses to flag another item next year, then they can apply again and receive, right.
And they typically are quite a bit more than what is being awarded by either cultural assets or the Arts Council. And we just, the Arts Council grants were pulled off the agenda. It was supposed to happen the same day as, but I think Ron wanted to scatter them around a little bit more this year. And they were all approved too. And so we have gotten our grant agreements out now. And this is just a list. I thought you guys might be interested in. We're fun.
Yeah, I actually have a question, which I thought was interesting to look at the list. I obviously knew how to apply for special events support, but you also got the operational support. And this may tie into our next agenda item. But looking at some of the folks like, you know, Tampa Theater, like FAMOPA, like, it was interesting that they don't apply for the special event, but is it because they get operational support? Well, because like Tampa Theater, for example, has a special event, but they get more, are they fishing in the wrong pond, I guess is the question.
You know, one of the good things I think about this program coming up the Arts Council that I discussed with Rob is that we can cross-pollinate much better. And at the time of application, if it looks like it's for an event or something, we could say, hey, and they can apply for both and see what, and this has happened before. I mean, the first year, Gasparilla Music Festival was the first, and they got more, Gasparilla Festival for the Arts. So this is happened. So we kind of give everybody the option. We've got all the grants posted and the dates on our website, special event and the others. The cultural development is general operating support. Yep. And the community arts impact grant is projects, but the project could be an event. So, right, you know, it's perfectly fine to apply for. You can apply for everything that you qualify for or is eligible for, but you will only be allowed to accept. And of course, you're going to go with the most.
And are we allowed to encourage these nonprofits on here to apply for both? And when I think of a cultural asset, like the Tampa Theater, like Tampa Theater comes to mind. I was like, oh, I'm surprised they're on the list of the smaller ones and not the bigger ones, right? So,
and I, full disclosure, I represent the Tampa Theater, I represent Strat Center, and those conversations have occurred. That is a strategy.
Got it.
So yeah, there's other aspects that make them, you know, if they had an event coming into their building, they would allow that event to go after something, but they themselves would not pursue because they're not doing that event. Typically, it's a third party.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. What as staff we try to do is let people in the bar know all their options. Yep. Good enough. And then if it's a strategy, you go one direction or the other. But I do think, you know, it's interesting. Something that came up with the commissioners was, you don't fund veterans other than the Victory Ship, but we've been funding the University of South Florida for an art education for veterans for a number of years. And this year we have another veterans group here. And I think the arts classes for victims of sex trafficking. I mean, this really reaches, these projects aren't all events, but they're kind of personal projects. But I just thought it'd be interesting for you all to see who else is getting funded, and it helps with that cross-pollination and getting the word out that you can apply. Just because you always apply for one thing doesn't mean you can't apply for the other. But typically, special event partnership grant is going to be more than any arts council grant. But a commissioner flagged item is likely going to be more than anybody's.
And I think the Tampa Theater, if they did one, it would be a fundraiser.
We have that line of it.
Yeah, that's the challenge. They don't have things that fit within the criteria. That's it. Yeah. So we do that event with them, right? But it wouldn't qualify. So yeah. And going back to like the comment, it's not that our special events partnership grants doesn't fund veterans. If a appropriate veterans event came before us and it wasn't a fundraiser, then it would be eligible and we would fund it. So again, the criteria for each of these grant programs is distinctly pointed to different activities. Ours is holistically not a fundraiser, holistically, to be an event that's incubating and growing community assets, cultural
and
assets.
2 years ago, we did approve funding for the Veterans Memorial Wall in Julie B. Lake Park. They didn't end up taking that money because they couldn't fulfill everything on the back end of it. I think they didn't have a policy that was required or something. So they didn't get the money, but we did approve it.
Right.
So the Tampa Bay Veterans Arts Center applied for Arts Council funding in 2000 and 2020. And they were located in Malicious County at that time. So I had a good talk with him. I said, you know, if you're doing all this great stuff, if you want county funding, you're going to have to relocate to Hillsborough County. And lo and behold, he did. And I've already told him he's trying to bring the 9/11 exhibit and wants to have it at the fireman. I've already told him about the next opening day. He's all excited about it. And of course, now he wants to apply for everything. Like, no, you've got to choose.
Pick the highest and best. Yeah. So.
And going back to your comment about fundraising, I'm going to make sure, because I think that's what our next agenda item is. Like, even looking at the last tranche, there are some where it's still so gray. Okay. I just want to make, because that's kind of where.
Yeah. And I think historically, the dialogue has been around. There's been some that have been blatantly fundraisers,
right? And
we had to address those blatant fundraisers because they didn't. There wasn't a, for better words, redeeming quality on the other side of the equation. It was just a fundraiser, and it was just the dollars that we were going to be giving them was passing through for fundraising, not building equity into an event. And that, I think, was the bright line we drew. We still have several, and we've had that debate, healthy debate about there are going to be events that do fit our criteria, but have a small component that has a benefactor type of thing, because that helps build community. And that's going to be an ongoing debate. And that's why we have a commission with multiple people who get to have a viewpoint that is educated, that then gets to weigh in, and it's a collaborative vote so that we can have a balance, because we all have different perspectives. I mean,
throwing an event, you can't, as an event planner, you can't do it without a tie to the community. And so, a lot of those people who see that event are volunteers through an organization, maybe a benefactor in some way. So there's got to be a balance by some metric.
And from the I know the reason, like, our seats on this board are philanthropic, so we come from it with the person who's trying to become beneficiaries typically, or the grantor.
Right.
I try with all of my not-for-profits that I work with for philanthropic efforts, we're looking for third-party events. We're looking for the white parties of the world and the Avila tennis tournaments and the polo to be the benefactor, right? Because that event is doing good things in the community. They help elevate the brand, they get the message out, and they get you money. But they're doing other great things in the community beyond the fundraising. It's a trick, because we also can't have an organization that is coming so that we can help them pay their payroll, right? And they're doing a fundraiser internally to pay their operational fees. It's a tricky.
I've noticed when I've been scoring the applications, there are a lot that are obviously fundraisers, and also some that come back year after year where I really question whether they should, where it's really is like, is this funding enhancing the event in any way? And for me, if it's a fundraiser, then I'll look at what they want to use for. In some cases, they've specifically said it's because they want to add additional music entertainment. And to me, that's adding the cultural asset to this event that happens to be a fundraiser. So I'm more okay with that, because what we're really paying for is to provide jobs for musicians.
Or instruments for children.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like a case-by-case thing. Hypothetically, I'm not thinking of any event in particular, but let's say somebody wanted to do a food-related festival, and there was they're doing the same thing year after year. They're not adding any type of artistic element to it, and the proceeds of the ticket sales go to a cause. Like, to me, that's a fundraiser.
So basically what we just did was kind of a precursor to all, kind of refreshed and brought back some of the energy that we've had around the conversations in the past. So let's move to number 8, which is our review of the potential funding rubric discussion. Oh, yes.
All right. Relative going back to the study, does the study also give insight as to how these particular silos of support are being are having an impact? I mean, we've got events, operational, project. We've got here, what's this one? Educational experience or equipment, etc. Does the study break down and give us an idea which of these silos are effective and which ones are not?
Not really. It is only the nonprofit arts organizations. And as we were starting the study, we had to get the NTEE codes, national taxonomy codes, because they have to fall in the arts and culture range somewhere. Now, a lot of our special community arts impact grants that we've given have been food banks and things that we would not be gathering information about them, but we will fund projects of a cultural nature. Everyone that's cultural development grant is an arts organization. That's specific for arts organization. And I would think with the special event partnership grants, for the most part, do you have a sense on that, Eileen? If which ones are special event partnership grants? I mean, something like, if it's a community organization doing events, they would not necessarily be an arts organization, even though there's a cultural component to it. So
we're invited to participate. I will say not everybody participated, right? We had 81 total participating organizations of a possible like 150-ish organizations. So it's not apples to apples. Not everybody participated, but there should be some representation of the festivals. And some of the festivals especially were very good at helping collect audience data and putting things out there in a very meaningful way. So,
but for purposes of Rich's question, the AEP itself is more of a holistic ecosystem view of ROI, and so it's not.
So we can't attribute a value to any of these individual funding silos as to impact.
No, but we do have a new data collection method in the Arts Council that we're going to be using in 2024, inputting data that's called the Cultural Vitality Suite. And it will compare, it has different comparison points, and we can put the non-profit, for-profit arts organizations in there as well. And we will do benchmarking to see how we compare to other population with 5 other communities we've identified. We'll have much more detailed information, I think, in that regard. Maybe not exactly what you're looking for, but there may be a way to get that out of this other database that we're starting to use. But it's going to be way beyond who goes into that is going to be much beyond the nonprofit sector. So I think it will give us additional good information, whether it will be specific to that or not. I think we'll be able to do a lot more benchmarking.
If you can carve out the impact, that's what I'm asking for.
Right.
Does the $2,000 that we give to this person over here to on the equipment side, is that in a relative term, is that as impactful as the $13,000 that we're offering to this organization over here for operational expenses?
Well,
because otherwise, if that's not the case, I'll eliminate these, take that money and put them over here. Where's my biggest bang for the buck?
Well, the individual artist grant for helping them their professional career has sort of a different purpose than the organizational funding for either projects or general operating support. And we do get, we track and their careers, and we get a lot of testimonials about things that are really pretty impactful that happen after they get that piece of equipment. But you can't really compare the two.
To the point of the conversation regarding making it have meaning, not to the arts organizations, not to the arts community, but to the taxpayer. What is my impact? Why am I giving this person this amount of money? And this is one of the issues regarding funding the nonprofits. what is the direct impact of the involvement of that particular amount of money to that organization and or person, and that I can justify to the general public to doing that. If I don't have to eliminate it, or I can shift it accordingly to where it has the greatest impact. So it needs the impact of the data that you're getting needs to drill down specifically to the funding that's associated with that impact. Otherwise, we're just saying, well, compared to everybody else, well, what is everybody else doing? Maybe they're putting their funding in a different mechanism or structure or formulation that we're not doing. So we're not really comparing apples to apples. And said, well, they have an arts community over there, and they're generating X dollars, and we've got an arts community over here. And that's about all you could say about it. You're not being able to critically analyze the value of this profit. I'm sorry, this grant process here. And I'm just trying to think of where the conversation is going to go regarding the funding of the nonprofits.
So in my opinion, the AEP, it's the value of the data there is a little bit distinctly separate from the conversation about how do we qualify and quantify the direct value for our special event planning partnership. That's a conversation we've had ongoing for some time. As we initially stood it up, we've seen an evolution of our scoring, of our criteria, of our rules of engagement, of our applications, inherently because we felt that that was of concern. And I know over the last 2 or 3 meetings, we have kind of persistently talked about that. And I know that we talked about the fact that we now feel like we've been doing this long enough that we actually have some history in some of our, again, because we have been evolving, even our own data is not apples to apples, because what we may have done in cycle 1, 2, and 3 may not be completely aligned with how it's going to look on paper for 5, 6, and 7, because we have made so many adaptations in order to be responsive to assuring real highest and best use of the dollars, value, accountability, that we don't have anybody who is, in the system that should not be in the system. So what I'm hearing is, so I see AEP and my view of how we tell that global story about Hillsborough County, a bit aside from, as we're now in our going to our 6th year, is there a mechanism then that, and if it's the cultural vitality suite or it's some other kind of way to data mine off of what we do, input, where it's going, and then start to benchmark ourselves? I think that would be really valuable over the next 2 or 3 years to be able to say, looking back, in the first 3 years, this is what our snapshot looks like. In the second 3 years, this is what it looked like. Going to the next 3 years, this is what we are anticipating. So we can tell the story about the why. Why is this a good investment? And I've been the broken record on this. Everyone knows it. We are the financial stewards of these, taxpayer dollars. When we make a commitment to these events, are they truly doing what they're intended to do? And is there an economic impact? Is there a cultural impact? All the things we say are important to the values of this program. So, I think that's, I don't know if the cultural vitality suite, you think that
it is about identifying impact. We're just test driving it right now, but we'll be kicking it into full gear in 2004. And I'm going to send you the information about it. I'll send it to all of you if you'd like. I think it will be a useful tool. We are just in the formative stages of implementing it, but it will cover so much wider universe and collect data from all sorts of national sources that we don't have to go out, and that we just put our own data in there, and it does impact studies for us, is my understanding. Again, we're in the infancy with this program, but I think we struggle, the Arts Council has long struggled with that. We do final reports for our grants, which are, numbers served, demographic. We ask all this, and we can show that this many adolescents and youth were touched by it, this many people and this many, but we have to trust the organization to give us figures, and you can't really hang your hat always on figures.
Coyote watch in the hen house.
Right. I like the idea of having this macro, top down, but I also think even though self-reporting from the nonprofits, but I think as we go through the rubric, more blatantly asking about the ROI, that they can self-report over the years would be really important. So we could say, okay, this $60,000 we got, show us how that wasn't just a line item on your budget, and it increased the value of your festival by X%. I think that's kind of what with the next conversation we need to go in, because it has to be both top down and bottoms up, so you can compare it and then triangulate where the differences and gaps are.
I think that's what Ian was alluding to earlier, is that when you have a year after year, how do you really measure change?
So also, like, in terms of talking about the economic impact, because I mean, there are some people that just don't care about the arts that much, but they care about the money. And I think in terms of the economic impact, we do have some limitations in terms of what we can measure with the resources we have. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to measure all the, but like looking at the cumulative impact though on like economic development of having a strong cultural community when we're competing with places that put a lot more money into the arts, their governments, than we do. I mean, it's not just like the individual grant to an artist to buy a piece of equipment. I think it's like the cumulative effect of having these institutions, having artists that are recognized so that we're viewed as like as an area with cultural strength, is one of the really attractive things that we use to sell companies to move to Tampa. And whether they care about the arts at all, it's more about like the quality of life that's related to it for their employees. And then I think about it the same way as like the Super Bowl and the Stanley Cup, because like you can measure the economic impact of those events, but there was something about like Tampa being on TV, being viewed as like this championship city that kind of resonated, that I think those two championships really put us on the map, and it helped with economic development. And you can't really tie it directly to those, but it's the accumulation.
Go to the boat race, get people
moving here. Yeah, it's like how do you measure that in terms of dollars and cents? Well,
I don't know how you measure it,
but we know
but you have to.
Yeah, right.
All right, because I can't sell it unless you measure it. It has no meaning unless we measure it. And right now, my board is looking at ways to be more accountable for the money that they're spending. Period, bottom line. We can be very altruistic in this, but it ain't our money. Right? So we've got to be more stewards about this than right now. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to pull this apart and they're going to say, all right, well, what is this silo of funding? How is it affecting that? Is this giving us more bang for the buck? Let's move money to that. All right? Is this just because we want to be comprehensive? I don't know. I'm not saying there's anything bad about any of this. I'm just saying that right now, it's a brave new world. And the intentions have already been laid out, what the direction is going to be regarding future funding considerations.
I hear you loud and clear, and having spent 30 years in the arts, we're always struggling with the image. It's much easier to measure impact in the social services. So, everybody struggles with this, but we're really hopeful that this new tool will be helpful. And to your point about companies coming here and wanting, one thing the data in the AEP6 revealed that I just thought was fascinating, and Randy talked about this quite a bit, is that of the people that said, yes, arts and culture is critically important for me to live in a community, lots of them never go to arts events. Yeah. They just felt they wanted to be in the community where their kids are growing up, and they would say, no, I don't want to, but it's important. You need this. So, that's that dichotomy I find very interesting.
And I want us just to real quick, this is a messaging thing. So we keep saying arts and culture. We are not an arts and culture program. We are a cultural assets program. And that goes back to what Ian, you were saying. It's about placemaking. It's about creating a cultural environment. Cultural doesn't mean painting. It doesn't mean photography. It doesn't mean clay. It means cultural asset. And so I think that's what we have to make sure that we're also, when we're talking about this in relationship to, as taxpayer dollars, as to our county commission, who is our creator, this is about the work we're doing from a cultural asset. We're placemaking. We are making sure that we have a robust environment that is conducive for those other things. So it may be music, it could be art, it could be supporting and uplifting, underrepresented communities. It can be so many things. And so I do want to make sure that we take off the arts and culture hat when we're talking about our grant program and really focus on the culture assets. And it's about the messaging, and then taking those data from the report from the AEP and talking about that when you make investments and we're a part of that investment, this is the data that starts to demonstrate that there is a ROI on the economic front, indirectly, directly. And this is the same debate and argument and challenge, because quantifying something versus qualifying something are very different statistical animals. So we have to be able to do both. We have to be able to tell the story about why cultural assets in our community, for job creation, for keeping families, for keeping talent coming out of college, bringing companies here. We have to be able to be an economic development walking billboard for the qualitative side, while still quantifying why our local community should be okay with putting their taxpayer dollars towards this project, this cultural asset project, so that, you know, but then also talk about it from the lens, because again, I represent Tampa Theater, I represent Strad, I do a lot of the arts and culture too, but just so that's hopefully we, as we start to message this going forward, whatever we do, when we start to justify our spend and the taking of taxpayer dollars, whether it's cultural vitality suite, that's the output we want. Mm-hmm. That's the message. That one pager we need, that'll be our one pager, needs to be all of that. Mm-hmm. Qualitative, quantitative, data, big picture, and then micro. How are we spending our, I'm rounding $1 million annually? You know.
I think also I would just add, as we look to kind of do the evaluation, it's about placemaking, but we also want to make sure we don't fall into the trap of organizations that apply every year and know, like they just assume they're going to get $60,000 or whatever the amount is.
And then they're mad when you don't give it to them.
They're mad when you don't give it to you. We cannot just be like a line item in a budget. We have to show, what is your budget? How are you sustainable, especially for those who are on your own? And what can this extra money do to make you that much bigger and better, right? Because I do worry after a couple of years, people are like, oh, we got that last, we got that last 2 years.
Assume.
Assume.
Now, again, I'm going to put on a hat from previous conversations that I've worn multiple times. And Rich, I'm sorry if it's stepping onto your space, because this is a Ken Hagen message that I've carried forward. The inception of this program was designed with the intent of several events that were persistent year after year, which is the Gasparilla suite of events. So again, we are, for all intent purposes, a line item for them. So with that said, just again, continuing to acknowledge that there was at inception an intent for those programs. It was how they were going to no longer be part of the underlying base budget of the county, but could do a competitive grant process through us. But if I'm just being honest, there's an assumption on their part that they will be persistently funded. So long as nothing occurs to make them ineligible.
But can we ask questions that, like, you can be funded this amount, but show us how you're sustainable without it, but it gets bigger. There's more ROI, right? This money coming in, the ROI continues to grow. I think is the question that we all.
And it would be very helpful to the organization to ask that question, because when you pose it versus when someone, my board poses it, the way it's presented, that question is a whole lot different.
And we have. So that has actually been, if you look at what our applications asked for data-wise and information-wise, and the criteria that we've developed, we have been a little bit more assertive, pointed on what are you using it for, you know, tell me how you're growing your organization, tell me how you're growing your impact. And then part of our now payments and eligibility to actually receive all of your payments is to then demonstrate that you did said things. So I know we've been moving in that direction, and we may have more work to do, which is why we have beautiful rubrics.
Well, I think the work you all have done up to this point is very commendable. And by the way, the Friends of the Riverwalk Holiday Spectacular was in, I think, USA Today this week, and as being voted on as being the best holiday display in the United States.
So we get credit for that?
But see, that's the type of thing I'm talking about. How do you measure the value of that?
Right.
If someone's looking at where to move.
Right. It's the same dilemma that I have, because I represent the film industry. And when we talk about when a commercial or a movie is filmed in your local backyard, this is not only our island that we live on. Everybody who has qualitative measures for indirect value struggles with the same debate. And so when you have fiscal hawks looking at every penny in a county's budget, but you better be ready to answer the questions.
Just quickly, there are a ton of things government does that you can't quantify. I mean, a good example of it's picking up litter. Government could just leave litter on the side of the road, but you pick it up. How do you quantify the economic impact of that? It sure as hell has one. Because Publix doesn't want to move into a neighborhood when there's a bunch of litter around, right? But we do that. We have parks that are underutilized. We have a whole host of things we do just for quality of life that can't be measured. So
we appreciate you saying that because you're government. So thank you.
I think this high level conversation is helpful to go in context setting. And I just before we dive down to like rubrics and words, I just want to just see if we're like all on the same. So I know when this first started 6 years ago, eons ago, we had 2 different categories, and I know there are reasons why we went away from that. But in my mind, if you think about the goals of this, there are kind of 2 different goals. I just want to make sure if I'm wrong that I'm told now. There is the large sustainable ones, which we apply to every other year, the ones for which this program was intended, and we love because they are huge place-making cultural assets. For those, we want to make sure that they can kind of be sustainable without us, right? And any money, any additional taxpayer dollar that comes in grows their place-making economic impact in some way, right? But there's also kind of the smaller, newer ones who can't be sustainable without new funding, right? There is 2 different buckets. I don't know if we want to go back to 2 different buckets. We very much like that in the beginning, or maybe we're more sophisticated now about how we would have 2 different buckets. But like, is that how y'all think about it? Like,
yeah, I think we did it via the scoring, and knowing how we were going to score against those things. But the sustainable ones, there was a grant program before this that I go live and visit Tampa Bay, right? And they were annual. And so when this became an actual grant program, that went away, and that money, I think, was part of this one. So there's just programs out there that just think about that, and they're like, we get this money every year, we've gotten it for 10 years. But when we have the large sustainable ones, they're going to be sustainable because when you're that big, you can metric your event up or down to meet the bottom line. Like, I can be sustainable at a $100,000 event to $80,000 event just by altering my event with less things there.
So we want those events to be successful.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's hard to say, can you be sustainable without us? The question I think will always be yes at a certain size event. But once you get down to these new events, and I think that's where I struggled with the scoring, is we're asking a lot of the questions that we've worked on for the last 6 years, but I don't know all the answers as part of the process. So like, even before we even dive into that, I'm like, how this neighborly software, what can we do with that to have more split these questions out? These questions are these big long paragraphs, and we're supposed to go in there and piecemeal out the exact thing we want. How can we take that down, make them required fields, make a budget line a required attachment? You can't submit without submitting one of those. Make the marketing plan a required one. I'm just not seeing everything.
Are not currently required.
I don't know. They're not uploading the right documents. Like we're looking for an event budget and we're getting an organizational budget, right? So that doesn't help me to understand your event and where this money is going to be applied to. So like, is the software, do you guys manage that software? Can you change that?
Right now, we are in the process this year of getting a new license for Neighborly. The Arts Council has a license, but the license still with economic development. So Lisa has access to the Neighborly software, but this year we put in the budget. We're going to be able to, first of all, it needs to be configured differently. It's not configured as well as it should be to make it easy for Lisa to use. And at that time, it's a very nimble, anything can be added, like things for our grant, like putting the reimbursements, entering it into Neighborly. They're just emailing them, Lisa. So we can make modifications. That system is perfectly capable of making someone and not moving on to the next question unless they get
do that. Like the question of if you receive these funds, what will these funds exactly go to? Its own bullet line required field. You know what I mean? Where you're like forced to answer the question we're really looking for.
So just to add to what Martine is saying, I actually looked at special event partnership grant program in that portal because I thought I was going to be able to use it to help set up all of our programs. And when I saw it, I went, no. And so we've discussed the fact
it's being
that
underutilized right now.
Yeah,
it was implemented in a way that doesn't always make sense.
I say something else. You know, after the grants come in, before the applications come in, before they go to the grant reviewers, we have a week of staff review. And if we know that you don't want to see an organization, we'll call them up. This is what the week of staff review is for. Oh, we looked at your application. You didn't follow the directions. This isn't
we
here.
Appreciate that.
You know, we will give you till the end of this week to submit that before they go to the reviewer. So we can do that. As we know that's what you want us to do. You want to see, we can do it.
Well, and I think, you know, again, and I've had some of these conversations with Martine directly, but, you know, it is an unfortunate situation at times because, you know, these are community organizations who know the team well. And there has been a few times when they have scrubbed out something and had to make that bad phone call and tell them, I'm sorry, but we're pulling your application. And they get very upset at times, right? Like this is hurting them financially. But I think that is kind of, I think what I've kind of taken from the board is the commission is I think we do need staff to kind of, you know, kind of scrub them down pretty hard and be very stringent.
If it's an
you know,
eligibility issue, it shouldn't ever get to.
Yeah.
I mean, if they just simply are not eligible.
I think what we're saying
there's gray area.
Yeah, there's eligibility, and that is a bright line. You're either eligible or you're not. But then I think that there is, are you complete? And are you sufficiently providing a quality application? And if the application quality is such, then it needs to be kicked back to them, giving them a grace period, whether it's a week, as we say you have this 1 week to cure this, and so long as you cure it to the expectation of the staff, we will move you forward in the process. I think that would also be very interesting, though, for us to know is if you had to kick it back, and what your concerns with it were. Because again, we've been doing this long enough now, and we have a lot of repeat, you know, applications. We need to kind of hold them accountable for quality so that our volunteer board members aren't having to sleuth out and make too much judgment, you know, guesses.
Quality. We have minimum scores. So like, for example, market room, you don't get a score. And then that way it doesn't come from Martine necessarily the heavy to say, hey, we don't think your application is good. You have a minimum score and you say, okay, say for example, 10, to get 10, you have to provide 10 items. If you don't provide the 10 items, you get a 0 on one of those 10, and that brings your score down.
So if someone in any of our grants, if they submit, and we think it's just you're an emerging organization, we ask for a W-9 and they submit a 990. You know, we call them and say, you know, you submitted the wrong thing. So anything like that, we can, but we really can't judge this is a bad.
Well, you can't judge whether their marketing plan because it's a flyer versus it's a marketing plan. That's not what we're saying. I'm saying is there's things that are required. And if it's a requirement for submission, and one is
call them on that.
Yeah. So there's eligibility, and then there are things that are required to be considered. If they aren't submitting the things that are required to be considered, then they should not be considered, which means you do not upload them in a neighborly, and none of us have to look at them.
One thing I look at, and I don't know that I trust when I look at it, is when they talk about their previous year attendance and revenue on that general page line, and I'm just not sure if they've been with us more than 2 years, then we should actually have that data.
Well,
and
we've started, I think last year was the first time we asked about that last year, and I think we have a spreadsheet that they now give to us. It has, I think we've done it 2 times now. There's a spreadsheet that you guys have started giving us last year, this year.
Based on the final numbers, when they submit for their humans, right?
And do y'all also cross-reference have to be like, hey, they're saying this, but we know it was actually this?
Oh, I'm looking at everything that comes in.
Yeah. They said they had 100,000 people, but you know, from aerial photographs was really 40,000, I think.
Well, and I know too, you guys have captured a time or two where, I mean, there was a hurricane, or there was, you know, there have been things that were outside of their control. I mean, so I do remember seeing footnotes a couple times from you guys. So I know that you are trying to capture what you can. But again, it goes back to what Ian said. There's, you know, you can't, there's only so much bandwidth within staff. They can't actually go and police every event. Now, the more of us that go to these events, and I appreciate, because now, you know, we all get the emails and we're all encouraged to attend. I've gone to several, and there have been some that I've walked away going, okay, that made sense to me. I'm glad I went. There was one that I came back with the flyer, and I'm like, sorry, city, but why is the city's why are they doing the introduction on this county funded event? I was like, why is the mayor on the front page, not the county commission? Like,
there are some groups that double dip.
I know.
So
you know, so I was kind of like, wait a minute. So it is good for us to go, but we can't, unfortunately, there's no way to police the events.
So one of those 504, it ended up they didn't get their money because nothing made sense. But they said attendance was between 50 and 500, depending on the time of day. And, you know, it's like, are you kidding me? That's not a real attendance, but it's okay. They didn't get their money because they didn't do anything right and or by the deadline. So, but it's, you know, these attendance figures, we have it with the other grants that we did. They're sort of on the honor system.
A little self-reported, right?
You know, it's self-reported. And you put it on a spreadsheet, but it's still self-reported. So it's really great if you're there and you say, oh, this was a huge turnout versus, I mean, you're not going to hit count that versus, you know, if you see a small turnout to something and they're claiming a big turnout.
And maybe that's something we look to do is, again, I had originally asked for us to be invited and given opportunities to go and be aware as they're happening because we go about our daily lives. You know, maybe we at each meeting, if the events have happened and we've attended, maybe we have to review report backs, book reports on the events we go to.
Used to do that when I was doing the live program. Somebody who attended, they just so whether they felt it was a deep event, they got funded.
They feel good about funding it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if you don't go, I can change you for ongoing day.
How many festivals does Hillsborough County have? You know? Most of these, if you look at what we granted are for festivals.
All of them?
Yeah. I'm just curious what percentage are not applying for it.
The Strawberry Festival never applies to shows. It's very interesting. That's a huge event.
Just because you think about the sense of place making, really what we're doing is a lot of festivals, right? Because that's bringing people to the community for sense of a common cause. And I'm just curious if we're reaching, right? We always talk about wanting to be more diverse and celebrating communities. What's that?
There's a lot of for-profit festivals nowadays.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And we still funded them. You know, they have a nonprofit component, like the restaurant week event. You know, produced out of Miami, it's a for-profit company, but they come in and they tie in with a nonprofit, and that's kind of like their messaging, and then they technically qualify for our grant.
And that's the trick. We have some, you know, again, third-party stuff becomes a bit of a challenge, you know. So, all right, let's actually dig in. I don't want to run out of time on the actual rubrics. So again, thank you to staff. This is from the feedback from our last meeting. And continuation of evolution of kind of how we want to best manage it as a subscription board. So we'll kind of make sure that everyone's taking a review of what they've suggested for the rubric.
These are just suggestions for you all to work through and determine what.
They were based on what we asked for. So
right.
This is at the direction of everybody's input from the last several conversations. We obviously couldn't implement it in the actual process of approval the last round. And it is in light of the fact that we recognize that there is and needs to be scrutiny on how we're spending these dollars. So, so look at the rubrics and discuss, and I think that the staff's recommendation on, so thank you for bringing this forward, that, you know, having a minimum designating a minimum score. Because as you know, what I did in the last round is I made my minimum 0. I solved it for myself, but that's not a healthy way, and it's not consistent, and that's not fair to the applicants.
So when you looked at everyone's scores from the last round, you had incidences where there were 2 zeros and 3 100s, and it seems a little rough. For the Arts Council grants, our larger organizations are required to have an 85. The emerging organizations, their project support is 80. The emerging organizations are 75, and the individual artists are 70. So if you take into consideration who's applying for that, we'll decide.
Now, as we look at this, I would love to keep in mind specific examples of what we think are eligible and are our prime examples, and the ones that over the years have been like had that inconsistency of the zeros, because I still think that eligibility, before we start exploring that eligibility still needs to get, because sometimes I think in the very beginning it was like, oh, they didn't fit the equal classes, but everything else fit, right? So I think to your point, you talk like vaguely like this, it conceptually looks good, but then you say, here's an example of like, I don't know, frameworks that Oyster Fest, for example. Do we end up funding that one, or we took that ineligible, correct? Framework. Oyster Fest.
I think you guys made that one ineligible.
I think we could, or that's if you're a fundraiser. When we look at these, I'd like to keep those examples in mind so that we get that right solved earlier.
Cool. So on the contest, so frameworks, we decided that was a pure operational fundraiser, and we therefore could not support it if wasn't eligible. The other one that we had hardly debate and we ended up funding was the ship, even though the monies were going to lighting that may have been more project than they were event, but we opted to fund it because it had the nexus with the city, the walk thing, river walk. That's it. Yeah. So I mean, again, so we are even subjective, and I think part of this exercise is that we recognize that if we are being too subjective, it calls into question the efficiencies of what we're doing, but also then it's not fair to the applicant. Right?
But if you're scoring at 0, you're essentially saying
you're not eligible. Right. That's what I did. Yeah. So
on the marketing section here, just a couple thoughts. I think that the last 3 bullet points may fit more with the top category, because they don't really seem to deal as much with marketing, but more about the overall quality of the event.
I agree with that.
And one thing, I think there's been a big diversity in the quality of the marketing plans. And I think that some people do like marketing and like earned media and paid media. Some people view marketing as just paid media. I think what I would like to see is more of an emphasis from the organizations on their earned media, because I think that's where a lot of the community payoff is. Like, how are they going to get media coverage for their event? Like, they should at least have like a plan to do like some type of press contacts or a press release or something. So I would maybe, if we could have a line in here that allows us to score the quality of their earned media, that's something that matters a lot.
So first, I do agree. I think that it provides justification for the grant request, the evidence of ability to acquire private support. Those aren't marketing. Those are underlying, kind of actual kind of core things. So I would move those up. So criteria of marketing, you're right. So, and somebody who does marketing and PR and my degree's in it, marketing and advertising and public relations are very different things. They live and breathe often in the same sphere, but so we may just want to also expand when we're talking to our applicants. It's not about their marketing plan. A marketing plan usually has an assigned budget, and they're buying ads, they're buying placement, and they're paying for boosts on social media. That's marketing. But advertising and, so marketing and advertising can be somewhat interchanged, but public relations. So I think we do. I think you're right. It should be provide a marketing and public relations plan that includes description of target audience, right? Who the stakeholders are. So who are they targeting? Who are they marketing and targeting with their media relations? And then there's specific strategies. And then I would assume that when I see specific strategies, I'm seeing a bullet point that talks about their social media channel work and whether they're boosting or not, and who they're using as a third-party validators to amplify, and are they working with somebody who's their MC to help push it out through their channels. That's in social media, like that's the PR plan. Are they writing a press release? Are they putting out a media alert? What are they doing? Are they getting B-roll? Are they sending out pictures? What are they doing to get pre-event, day of, and post-event public relations, right? Because no different than being in USA Today or something, that's part of the inherent value, is that exposure to the story of what we're funding. Then there's going to be advertising marketing, where they pay someone to create a flyer. They are, putting it on, advertorial in one of the newspapers. They're in everyone's calendars. Whatever they're doing on the marketing side, that usually costs them money to do. They're printing little cards and they're going around and handing it out at something else. What are they doing for marketing? So Ian, is that kind of like what you're thinking we should be seeing?
Yeah.
So how do we then, in the application,
except the application to say community and kind marketing opportunities, bullet points, and paid opportunities? Because I know that we have encouraged people to take this grant funding, if this is going to apply some of it to paid marketing,
right?
Because we wanted the message out.
Can I suggest something possibly? You could create a series of checkboxes, especially for the less sophisticated organizations who may not know to list all these things.
That's kind of what I'm thinking too. We have some like small.
Yeah, and if it was listed as a series of check boxes, they could just check off in the application. Then if they don't know to put that into a plan or to talk about that, they can check the box and say that's something they're doing.
And I think that's my point, is I don't want to be measuring them on something that we didn't clearly communicate was an expectation, because you can't measure what you didn't expect. Like it's not fair to them if we're like, we called it marketing and now we're looking for PR.
Yeah. But you could sort of say something like, which of these options will be included in your overall communication strategy, and they can just go check, 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 check.
As long as there's a please explain box, because I think that people need to.
What are you doing for each? Check it and tell us what you're doing for each.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. You can add, but that might save some of the less sophisticated organizations that wouldn't necessarily include that if they were typing out a plan.
But and again, I deal with this because we do marketing and public relations wraparound for my clients. I have clients who, like, when I do I call it an asset map. I'm like, okay, so you guys have a Facebook page? Yes. How many friends do you have? 7. That's not meaningful, right? Like, I'm on Twitter and I follow one person. That's not meaningful, right? So again, just because they are doing it doesn't mean they're doing it, if that makes sense too. And so again, but we can't police. We can't go and look at every single person's Facebook page. Are they uploading their flyers there? Are they getting interaction? How many impressions are they getting? Because quite frankly, when I do an event with a client, my young lady who does my work on mine, she prints, there's data reports that you can get off of when you do stuff. And we produce that to the client, showing this is how many impressions you got. This is how much value, right? Like, so but we have so many that aren't that sophisticated, we couldn't ask that, but we're way from having real accountability on that kind of stuff.
So we have, like, some of these applications are for a small amount of money, so you don't expect like this huge plan. But if you're asking for $100,000, then you should have a pretty good marketing plan. Like if you're doing a neighborhood more oriented event, then you could talk about your neighborhood posting on your neighborhood association webpage and maybe putting up posters at the local church or whatever. But then the big events, it's like they should have a paid photographer. I mean, so it's really like relative to the.
So is it trying to determine if the marketing, but for the applicant, trying to determine if the marketing budget is in line with the event budget?
I think for me, it's more like looking at the marketing plans that people provide right now. They're just like all over the place, and they don't really cover what I think is the most important part, which is getting in the media.
Getting people to show up.
Yeah, it's like the whole, like if a tree falls in a forest and nobody's there, did it make a sound type thing? It's like these events have to resonate after the events. Like it can't just be like the event happened and people showed up and then it's done.
Yeah, they're typically their marketing and advertising is to drive attendance.
Yeah.
Typically. Public relations and media relations components are to help tell the story, elevate the halo of the brand. It's to then, do the placemaking piece we're talking about. It's like letting everybody know what a wonderful place we live in. All these good things are happening, whether you're coming or not. And that usually has a human element to it, a story angle. It's not buy a ticket. It is, this event is doing great things in our community, and this is how and why. And it's a feel good.
But I think we get good marketing plans from those events
We do.
that are at that level. I mean, I think those are the best marketing plans that we read, really, are from the ones that are out.
But they're same every year.
Yeah, hopefully they're updating their data,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, from the previous year. But I know I'm not going back to the previous year to check. I'm just reading the data that's in the application. It's the smaller ones, that really are like, hey, we're putting it in our community newsletter. We've got an email group of this.
That's we're going backwards, yes.
I don't know how to, I think a quantifiable way that I'm used to seeing it in an application is what % of your expenses are in marketing,
With ours, the cultural development grant is a lot more, the application itself asks for a lot more information than arts impact, because you're assuming that someone who's applying for at most $5,000 is not sophisticated enough. I ran an organization, we weren't sophisticated enough to be able to really, do a lot of that stuff, because it was just me. It didn't have the manpower to be able to do a lot. So you're not going to be able, it's like apples and oranges. I'm not trying to suggest.
And I think that's okay. But again, if you use a %, if you're saying we'd like you to be in, 5 to 10% range, it's like where you get a strong score the way we have it. We could say on that rubric, these are kind of if you're spending 0 to 3% your week, marketer. Even at $5,000, you can quantify that,
Right, but should the criteria for evaluating a smaller organization be the same as saying yes, for all music festivals?
I think that's the point of the rubric, is that we're trying to be able to, as a reviewer, score them on some kind of same idea.
I think the underlying expectation should be all the same. It's, again, application, recognizing levels of where they're at in, if they're in year 1 versus year 15, whether they are a $10,000 event or a $1 million event, somebody who's getting $4,500 from the grant or getting $100,000 from the grant. I mean, again, but we're trying to not make it completely subjective. There has to be, a way to measure, but it has to be, and so and maybe because we evolved from a 2-bucket process. We called them the new events and the established events. The problem with the new events is that the new events sometimes were big new events and sometimes they were little new events. Same with the established. Sometimes the established were little and some were big. And so then we noodled around trying to figure out little versus big. But then you had big that was new. So it was like we got
tenure with.
What if you used instead of established versus emerging?
But we've done that.
Yeah.
That's wordsmithing. That's not giving you a bottom line, yes or no, black or white.
Little events, this grant money was contingent, I think, on that event happening.
Right.
Like we have to go apply and find money to make it happen.
And that goes to the 2 buckets. There's the big ones where we want to show like you can live without us, but we can make you bigger and better. And by being bigger and better, you provide more ROI to the community. The smaller ones, like we get it, you're not there yet, but you're celebrating diversity, you're placemaking in lots of new ways.
It's almost like we have 4 buckets, but it's more like a box, right? So like you've got almost like, when you have small, large, and then there's, but then there's intersections, right? With the, we'll call it new, emerging, established, I think we used 3 years, like if something had been in place for 3 years, we figured that gave them enough track record to become established. I think that's what I remember. So now the challenge we have is you'll have an event who thinks they're going to be the next Gasparilla, right? And so they're coming out of the gate, brand new year 1, and they want to do, a $400,000 project. But then you have literally the community folks who want to do a pumpkin patch, and it's like literally a $6,000 project. And they're both emerging, but they're not the same. Then you have these large events like a Gasparilla, who is both established, significant, gonna hit $100,000 out of the grant every year. And then you have small established that are gonna, you know, Pig Jam's probably not the right one, but because there's those type that are smaller. They've been doing it for 15 years. Taco Fest, right?
Should they apply by amount of grant being requested? Because I think that's the threshold. If somebody's getting $80,000, we're gonna have a heck of a more lot of I dotted T's crossed. We're asking for somebody to do $2,000. So take it out of that. And it's just like, what's the award amount? It's like grant process. This is the amount I'm applying for. And so, and then we know, I think sometimes when we read these in Neighborly, we're reading the Gasparilla Music Festival, and we're going down to an improv, you know, so and you almost,
it's a jump in thinking.
It's a jump in thinking.
Right.
So I think if we're able to categorize where we start with the big chunk, these are the tranches of, you know, that are applying for 50 and above. And these are the ones that are applying between these amounts, maybe 3 different amounts, whatever it is, you all decide. And that way we can wear our 3 different hats when we're looking at those amounts, and then we are able to be more subjective. I'll give them more
I would like to start with a smaller tier in my mind, where it's like, I hate to start with like the big, beautiful application with the people that have like paid staff to do it, you know, and then compare everybody else to do it.
That's
so if I was going to sort it and able to sort it by an amount, like there was a column by, you know, available award amount, and then you can sort by that column.
And look at all of those in one kind of sitting. So, yeah. So anything that's getting less than $10,000, or the max they could get would be $10,000. You're looking at very similar styles. Yeah. So those are all the ones that their marketing plan is literally, yeah, we're putting it on our own Facebook page, and here's my flyer. Right?
I like Elizabeth's point though about the money. I mean, and whether it's a new event or an existing event, if they're asking for $100,000, like our standard should be the same.
Yep.
I mean, and if they're asking for $5,000, our standards can be a little bit lower. But these, and that kind of sends a message to them too, like maybe start small and build up over the years. And that's.
They're asking for $5,000 and it's an event. They might be better served by applying for our community arts impact grant. I mean, it's not as much money, but it's easy. It's not as challenging as the application for special events.
We talked about that at some point along this journey, that, you know, if you guys do see grants that come across that are, you know, really not best suited here, we do want to help navigate them, right? But we've also
already recommending special event partnership grant to people who seem more well suited to that than the arts.
So we also had one where, like, you know, if we know that they're going after other monies, it's like, hey, FYI, you're going to make yourself ineligible here. We had one not take our grant because they got a different grant, or vice versa, like the year before or something. So,
and when that comes out, we advise if they qualify for an Arts Council grant or qualify for special event partnership grant, we say, and it happened this year with it, we said it happened with New Tampa Players.
That's what it was.
We said, Nora, don't send us your grant agreement. Don't sign. We'll give you an extension until you hear about that grant. And that was fine. So then she forfeited the Arts Council and took the special event.
And that reminds me, because that conversation led to the fact that right now, under our current request pattern, remember I asked for the full budget of what we spent over the years, that's not an issue today. But at some point, if we're successful in our own marketing and we get more ample requests, at some point we're going to have more requests than we have funding. And what we don't want to run into futuristically is setting ourselves up to where we are underfunding or not funding someone, denying an application with somebody else who's trying to double dip or is playing the best foot in either side. So I would hate for a New Tampa Players to have applied, been awarded at the expense of another entity, only to go after another bucket and then be like, just kidding, I don't really want your money, and this person didn't get anything.
So that's like these deviations, which I found this very interesting.
Are they interesting?
Yeah. What you said there goes right to this. And we're not in the position yet. So now they didn't get the funding. Nobody lost out. Like what I hear you saying is there's going to be a point we're going to make a decision, and we're going to hold money for somebody.
So I have a question. Right now in the application process, and I haven't looked at this for a couple months, so hold me if I'm not being honest. What we do is we say, give us your budget, give us your marketing, tell us everything about your special event, and then we're going to rate you and give you a percentage of what you're asking for based on how the council, what the commission thinks, right? Is the better model if we start looking at amount awarded, amount requested, more of a traditional grant process. But I
yes or no?
You are applying for, submit your budget as attachment. I am applying for $60,000 to do X, Y, and Z. I am applying for $10,000 to do X, Y, and Z. And then we're able to hold more accountability. So it's less of a percentage that's subjective based on an event budget and more of a grant application process to support a cultural event. It's a totally different way of looking at it.
You've got my brain going. So I just want to make a comment and see if that keeps what you would say to it.
Okay.
Right? Like, I have trouble sometimes trusting the information, the budget to which we get, because I know it's there, that number is what's being used, what they'll qualify for.
It's inflated.
Like, I have a trust issue with that.
So I serve on like 3 or 4 different, I think it does. I serve on a lot of grant, and like, it's like, I'm applying specifically, Gasparilla Music Festival, you do your $1 million budget, you want $70,000 from us, tell us exactly what that $70,000 is going to do. And we don't care about the rest of the budget for it. We don't have to like.
So then they can submit the receipts for that $70,000. It seems like that would be pretty clear.
But it's a grant process. It's like, it's a totally different way of looking at it. But
well, currently, you don't require receipts, but the grant agreement, if I feel a receipt is needed to prove something, the grant agreement language gives me, I can ask for any.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. I don't have to ask for receipts. I kind of secure, but they say those business where there's.
But you know, it is helpful to see a canceled check or a bank statement.
But you guys also have the dilemma of proof of the match, which a lot of times in kind is very hard to do from a receipt standpoint. Like, because we have, remember, we also broke ourselves out in the 1 to 4, you know, so.
Right.
You know, so
what I think the grant process can solve is what you just talked about, how there was the deviation. 2 people scored at a 0, 3 people scored at 100. We average that out. Is that really the right outcome? Or is the outcome we're all looking at it from a $70,000 perspective? Okay, wow, they really proved they're going to be good stewards of $70,000. It's not just a line item in their budget. Because we're giving the, you know, the Gasparilla Music Festival $70,000, 100,000 more kids will be able to have instruments, or they're going to be able to draw 10,000 more people, whatever that is. Like, show us how this can make you bigger and better. And you ask it pointed for the amount of money that they're asking for.
We do that with some of our other grants, for whatever that's worth. And there's a change request form as well that the other grantees can use, so that if it deviates substantially from what they initially put into the application to what they actually need to use it for, Martine can look at why they're trying to make a change and approve it. Or not approve it. It makes no sense. Yes. I mean, it has happened. But you know, so we do ask.
Yeah, Community Foundation, My Foundation, Bank of America.
It's an all or nothing proposition typically. You know, and we see that same challenge when we do funding from the state, right? So you go in and you put your budget request in, your LBR in, and what we call is called the haircut. So every once in a while, but what happens is they haircut you too much, and the project's dependent on that funding. If they don't fund enough, the whole project's dead, right? So right. So there's just depends on. It
doesn't have to be all or nothing, right?
I like the all or nothing, but I just know that there's also sometimes they, to your point you made earlier, sometimes they can still live with less because they can scale.
Yeah.
But if they got nothing, the whole event's dead.
Yeah.
I hate for any event to be that dependent on us. I think that's going to be true more of the smaller, more incubating events than the big ones. If Gasparilla Music Festival, because I know I upset some folks because I heard about it afterwards, but I scored 0 on one of the Gasparilla ones.
I heard about it too.
I know. But did you look at their budget? They had more money than they had literally showed on their budget, more revenue than expenses before they got the state grant. So, or the county grant. So it's kind of like, I just can't say that they need the money more than the county needs to keep the money and roll it back to GR if they already have a budget that they've provided. If they didn't get the grant, their event would not have been harmed. There's going to be little ones so that's my only heartburn is that I know because I've done those little events too, that it's dependent on.
That's why I asked the question, what are you applying for and what exactly is going to go towards that would not otherwise be made possible without you getting this money.
Right.
May I help your heartburn?
Yes.
We have deliberately staggered other grant deadlines, looking at special event part of the 2 grant periods there, and it doesn't work so well for the second, the first cycle, but the second cycle where you get a lot. If someone doesn't get funded and they're a really small organization, they haven't missed the community or its impact. And when you call them, and we've done this, somebody will apply for cultural development and they really just don't, but that's why we do cultural development before the other grants. So if they don't get that, they have another place to go. And, that only works if it's small,
right.
But that should help the heartburn if you really think, they don't seem as really capable. They need to get some seasoning before they apply for our grant. You've got to wait to get the money without, and it's a much easier process. So.
And in some cases, like you guys will have people who get like $2,000. They'd actually get more if they come apply for the community arts impact grant.
We have gotten very into this, and I know we have Mercedes on the call. I just want to make sure she's not trying to say anything.
I don't see her name there anymore.
Okay, maybe
yeah, Mercedes left a while ago. Sorry to tell you that.
All right, no problem. Okay, I just want to make sure because all my glasses on, but
yeah,
because to me again this is where the bleeding heart of me. So like remember last round we did not fund the mental health event. So what do? I go try to find them funding elsewhere. I felt bad because it was a great event. It just didn't fit our thing, right? Like it deserved funding. It just couldn't have it here.
But their numbers were way off.
I know that, but they're still a great organization. Yes. But it was like,
those were made a dream.
And remind me what is our criteria?
They were delivering a healthcare service.
It wasn't like placemaking.
Like they showed their numbers, their budget, and revenues from last year in this event alone, and they had the event last year. This event alone would have like made them 400%, higher. It was just like,
yeah. But they're a great organization, and I work extensively in that space. I was like, I'm gonna find you new friends, So. Rich, what are you thinking? You're over there quiet.
Well, I understand what we're kind of talking about, the elements of the review process. I'm just looking at the very front line of the item that says special event partnership grant application scoring rubric must receive a minimum of blank points and be eligible for funding. Okay, well, what is that? Let's work on that. Let's work on the big, and then we can worry about the small.
And that's new, right? Because
that would be new.
We don't have a minimum score.
That's what I thought.
We're just putting it there, but typically when you use a rubric, there is a minimum. That's the way with state grant. We should.
We just it never born. We just never got there. I think we discussed it. I think Santiago had some really good thoughts around it, but we just never pulled the trigger. But I think we're there now. So, I think it's time.
It should make your reviewing easier to have, when you're looking, well, I don't know where, because, and give you, and you will know when you score someone that they're not going to be funded if it's below that. So that going in, which might solve some of the.
Right. Well, I think the reason why I think the rubric kind of floated up was that because we did have some that scored but then it puts them in a position to still receive funding, which then puts the staff in a position where they're now trying to distribute funding to somebody who probably isn't going to, it's going to end up on the list, right? Later on, the last page.
Yeah.
Because our instincts and our measuring was accurate. They weren't ready to receive county funding, but we still gave them some very low percent total. They should have just been eliminated organically.
Right. And in regards to that specific line, my recommendation is a minimum of 50 points with no score being below 11.
No score being
below 11, based on the formulas here. So anybody scores in the weak category in any of the 4 categories you're talking about, they don't qualify. That's it.
But wouldn't they be?
So we're actually saying a minimum score of 11.
Average.
No, I'm saying a minimum of 50.
Okay.
Because that takes 4 categories into consideration here.
I get you.
With no single score being less than 11.
But that's the average single score.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you're all average, right?
Otherwise, I would have screwed everybody up.
Right.
They'd been non. Well, think about that. If that's the case, so that's the average. So you wouldn't. So because I didn't score them 0, they would be on top.
Yeah. If I was the outlier,
yeah.
Right. So again, what you don't want is an outlier to be able to run the show, right, and hold hostage the whole process. That would not be something that wasn't my intent.
I had in my mind.
Yeah, that's why because the number of 50 is just a little bit more than the minimum number in each of the 4 categories. That's all.
We can't make a motion, but we can make a recommendation to staff.
Ron knew that we weren't going to have a quorum, and he knew we were discussing this, and he said if we received consensus that we wanted to have a minimum score and consensus that the rubric was good and got everyone's feelings on it, that was good enough, that we didn't actually need a vote, because this has been putting it off to the staff. Hey,
More tactical.
you've given us the guidance of what you want. Now, what we'll do is we'll take the rubric, we'll play around with it, and then we'll send it back to everybody with the changes that we've noted here. And at that point, you can add or subtract, then you can see what we talked about, see if we're capturing what you all are thinking. And if we're not, you can edit it and send it back, and we'll put all the edits.
You have the 50 and the 11, which will be where we start with that. And then the only other feedback right now is on the criteria of marketing, with those 3 bullets are going to move up to the, basically, those are like eligibility, like those are core. So the strength and promote cultural assets.
There's one thing missing here that I'm just putting out there because it is on the application, and that is the safety and security of attendees.
We can add that.
I know I take that into consideration if they do or don't have the safety.
Let me just ask. So we have 4 criteria segments. Marketing, which is going to also be public relations or media relations. We have accessibility and diversity of local vendors and talent. There's accessibility to public and community benefit. Where does safety and security fit? Is that?
I'd probably put it to accessibility,
okay,
to the public and community benefit, just because if we're inviting you here, we need to make sure you're
right. How are you going to keep the public and the community?
And I look specifically to these smaller events because those are the ones that may cut the corners. Right. You know what I mean?
So the 3 bullets that are in the marketing now, where do they live? Because are they technically ability to strengthen and promote cultural assets, or is that a whole other segment of core functions?
These exact questions that are in the application.
I think it's in the paragraph above the section. Okay. It explains these bullet points in each of those.
We got these from the guidelines specific in there, and it may not all be in the existing application. We can do a check for them.
They are in the.
It is. Yeah. Okay.
I actually think it looks a little confusing.
Okay. Well, but there you go. There it is. we can.
If you want to suggest another way to format it, please.
We can.
You live and breathe this, so
we can change the application. We just can't change the eligibility for that going to the Board of County Commissioners. So the application is up to you as the board to decide what you want to say.
But Ian, with those 3 bullets, do you see them having their own criteria of like ability to deliver on the economic impact?
I would actually move those 3 bullets up to the ability to strengthen and promote cultural assets, because I kind of see
tell me where we.
It's the final 3 bullets of marketing.
So do I. Okay.
And the reason why is I think that first section really has 2 parts. It's like, do you have the ability organizationally to do this, and does it actually do it?
So financially, can you actually deliver?
Yeah, and we also asked the question about like where we got their background in event planning and that type of thing too.
But this is also not. It also asked the first one is eligibility,
right?
So it's eligibility. Are you able to do it, right?
And financially is the sound.
Yeah.
So I wonder if even, is there first an eligibility question?
That's what I was wondering. Is there an ability to deliver?
Yeah, like there's eligibility. Tell us how this is cultural asset and is not just a fund.
and really what I struggle to find is like, is it financially, like you're going to even financially do this? You know, do you have money in your bank account? Do you have a budget that makes sense? You know, and is your budget line item right? I don't know if you want to look at these budgets, but when I see like, you know, 40% of the budget under like, you know, payments to staff, and then I start questioning, is this an operational support? You know, but I don't feel like there's a good place for me to store that here.
So that's what I'm saying. Do we create a fifth segment with and do some of the bullets that are in the ability to strengthen, promote cultural assets, pull up into that other one along with these three? Is there an ability to deliver on the you know, deliver some word and the economic impact?
One is strategic. How is this a cultural asset? And the other is tactical. How are you able to deliver? You say this is going to be a cultural asset to the community. How are you going to deliver it? I like that.
Because that was the debate we've had historically, was we were worried about the definition of cultural asset, right? And that's why I was being careful earlier about like, it's not arts, it's cultural asset. Therefore, the water tower event or the pumpkin patch, it didn't have an arts element, it has a cultural assets element. So that's why we got to that bucket before. But now we want to step up, maybe add a fifth segment that says, we're looking at you from an operations standpoint and a fiscal. And if we feel like you are sound of mind on your business plan and your financial plan, then do you meet the cultural and or are you eligible generally? You're not a fundraiser, you meet criteria, you're a 501c3, you are a real thing, you're eligible. Do you meet the cultural assets definitions, and is your event within the parameters of our guidelines? Yes. Can you now actually do this, and can you do it with a fiscal responsibility and ROI that it makes sense for taxpayer dollars to be given to you? Okay, great. Now let's dig in a little bit. Let's dig into how you're going to make this accessible to the public, how you're going to keep them safe. What are you going to be doing to make sure that local talent and local economic impact is diversified? How are you going to market and do the public relations on this so that we know that it's actually going to be effective?
And I would say these two categories, the new one about eligibility and ability to deliver, is probably 50 of the 100, right? And these other three categories, these are the two most important ones.
Yes.
And then these are supporting.
Everyone think that makes sense?
So there's 5 categories. One category is 50 points. The other 4 categories are equally split.
No. I think we were saying the top, the first two, eligibility.
Well, we have a math problem though.
Yeah.
So
I feel like
I see 5 categories. I would say eligibility.
It has to be 40 or 60.
It don't have to be 25. Right. Yeah.
You can weigh things heavily.
Yeah.
We do that in our other rubrics. And Martine has a nice category, which I think is kind of what you guys are discussing, which is called fiscal responsibility and organizational capacity.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yep.
So, but it could be 25, 25, 15, 15, and 10. Right?
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
I put my calculator right now.
You guys are all palatable. Whatever you want the number to be.
We wanted to add up to 100 is what we want.
Exactly.
We do need words to add.
Whatever you make sense to make add up to 100.
But I do think the most important is, are you eligible? Is this a cultural asset? That's what we all struggle with. So the answer pointed that question. Okay, checks that box.
And you've already done, as the staff, eligibility, bright line. It's the gray area eligibility that we're talking about in the second segment. Then we're talking about the fiscal ROI, which starts to get us a little closer to really having an articulation around, did we think about this from the lens of, these are taxpayer dollars. We're going to take these taxpayer dollars out of these taxpayer pockets. Are we bringing the value back to them? And can this organization demonstrate, at least on paper, at grant process time, that they can do what they're saying they're going to do? Then there's still the,
there's going to be
I know
things that, but I think we can help. If we get this done, I think it will give us more ammunition to decide who is eligible and who we need to ask some other things for to be able to go forward. And I do think we'll make your job of scoring.
And And more consistent.
Yes.
We want to get away from the 2 zeros and the 3 hundreds. I mean, that's just not.
This is about transparency.
Right.
And a grant process, when you've got a rubric and you've got a minimum score, that is very transparent. In early November, Commissioner Cameron Sapita asked me for everything about all of our grants, the Arts Council. And first I gave her all the Arts Council grants because I wasn't sure and then she said, no, she wanted cultural assets too. So I guess she was okay with everything, but we had a rubric and a score and everything for it. And it just I sort of thought, we're just missing something here where we can show transparency and accountability. And I think this will help.
So the 50-11, baking that into kind of the back end of it, honing in on a 5-point category, weighting some of them, making sure they add up to 100, and then being able to drill down a little bit further. I think the output will be easier.
So in that, what's the name of that category? Organizing excellence.
It's fiscal responsibility.
Okay. So we can move those budget and revenue questions out.
Yeah, 15, 16.
And on the budget one, I'll make sure you agree with it.
And make it more
Yeah.
just about
to hear reasonable and support sustainability.
2015.
I don't know for all of them. Like I said, we don't want this money to just be a placeholder in a budget. Sustainability means you're doing the exact same thing, right? We want to take out sustainability, but demonstrate growth and
Expansion and growth.
Partly when I score and I read that, I think about the application we got that was a $400,000 event budget, but they only had $60,000 in the bank. You know what I mean? Like, you can't pay your bills, wait for grant money or whatever. So I'm like, that is not sustainable. You come from a different, I think you're thinking sustainability over long term. This event can hold its own without us, right? Is that what you're
I do see this in 2 different buckets. That's why I do really want to be able to score them by the amount of money that they're asking for. I would like to hope some of these bigger ones can be sustainable without us because they know what they're doing, but they want our money because they can do something even more innovative. They continue to grow. They continue to make a huge impact, but it's not doing the same thing over and over again. It's doing more for the community or more for the culture. Then there's the newer ones who aren't sustainable. So I don't want to make sure that language can go for both, and those are.
And that triggered a thought, and again, I always want to be in that public record. We also recognize that even if it's $1, the county support has value, right? The support of the value of saying this is important to our community. So some of them, like Gasparilla, may or may not be able to do it without us, but should they? Right? I think that's part of the question because that mark of that, we always have third-party validator. The county saying that what you are doing and what you are investing in our community and what you're bringing back as a value proposition to the community is valuable. Therefore, we're going to invest in you. But yes, we want to make sure that it's sustainable, even if it is sustainable without us, it may not need our money.
Sometimes just because they're not adding something new, they didn't have our money, they might take something away.
Right. True.
So it's just to get the event player side of the like, if I don't get that money, I have to make some new decisions.
I'm going to cut.
Right.
Yeah, this is a grant program, not an entitled.
Yeah, and I think to that point, some people feel.
That's where I got the money last year, where it comes in. And we do have, for our community arts impact, our project grant, there is language that says we're not going to fund the same thing over and over. We need to see how you are evolving this and growing it and reaching different people.
See, we're not asking for a specific amount. We're awarded a based on the budget, right? Score. So it's just a different mindset.
Well, and I will tell you, the cultural assets, arts and culture, if you look at the state, they're only eligible for every 3 years, they have to wait their turn. So again, year after year after year, there still has to be some kind of measure that says this makes sense still, because the value of that event is only going to improve more than likely. The value of the county supporting said event is going to be consistent. However, with what the county has to, and the city is doing the same thing, they still have to continue to prioritize year after year. COVID, inflation, impacts to the community, a hurricane, you know, so as much as cultural arts, cultural assets, all those things are very valuable and are worthy of investment. If the county may have to change the way it spends its taxpayer dollars, as the city would, and you know, if you're choosing between Pig Jig and a fire station, right?
Are these funds though? I can't remember. Are these like TDC funds that are earmarked?
These funds will roll back to general revenue if we don't do so.
But I know that when we set this council up, I was part of it from the beginning. The idea that was pitched to the commission, I think by Commissioner Hagan at the time, was the county wants to support the defense. Yeah. You know, we can't imagine the county not supporting the arts festival. Yeah. You know, like it's a huge part to our county. So this is set up in addition to support those marquee events, maybe we'll say, year after year.
And I agree. So, have we given you guys enough to be dangerous?
Oh, you've given it. No, I think we know what's in your head with that, and our notes. We can get a first draft and then just send it out to you and get your comments. Would love to have this in place before the next. Now, in terms of, we originally set up the next cycle to open January 8th, but our county administrator, Bonnie Wise, said not to do anything until the nonprofit is decided on. So, and I think that's this next week's meeting, I'm not sure. So we may end up altering that a little bit, but we still don't have a lot of time. So give us about 2 weeks. This is a lot to add up. And
I think we want to do this right, not fast. So we'd rather, if it took longer and it delayed, we'd rather do it properly than to have try to rush it.
And that's fine. We'll just send you a second draft. And it's still a draft, and we can take another pass. And you may think of something between now and when you get that. Oh, I wish we talked about that. So you know, it's not too late. We can still do it. So it's been a great conversation. Oh wow, very, very much. Congratulations to all of you.
I don't want to run out of time, so because usually we're done by now, but we still got a little bit of time. But so I know that we need a discussion regarding the final payments for the deviated cash final expenses. So if you want to walk us through that.
It's just the language is deviates substantially. It's very hard for staff to interpret that and get into your head. So if we had like a cut point for the deviation, if you wanted to do it by budget size or the amount, like if it's a 50 to 100,000, maybe it's a bit than the smaller ones you wanted to. It's easier just to have one, but I wanted to give you all your options. So
let's have you tell us, give us, so Friends of the Riverwalk, there was a 71.37% deviation. So how does that manifest? What does that look like?
Just the money did not, the way it was spent did not align with budget that they submitted at their
because they were successful in getting so much in kinded.
I'm not sure.
That's what the note says. Fine. Okay. So what did they do with the extra money that they got?
They didn't get it.
They didn't get it.
They didn't get it.
They didn't need the cash because they didn't have the expense.
And they didn't get a final payment. Anybody in that category.
And sometimes that comes down to they didn't get a chance to do it. You know, they wanted to do it. It's in their plan. They got the funds to do it.
But they didn't take. But if they don't take the dollars, then it's a wash. Nobody's
the money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like you gave them the money and then they got the kind. Right.
Oh no, they just didn't get the last payment.
Yeah. Is this a deviation either way though? Like if it deviates because they brought in more money or less money,
it's not specified, but I'm not sure that scenario is actually happened. But
so these are all where they brought in more and spent more.
Because their event can run, they can have a run over. That's not our problem, right? Like if
I'm always being cautious when they're doing the budget. They're doing like worst case scenario, and then oh my god, they said yes, yay! Like they're giving it to us, not to buy it, but like you're gonna build a conservative budget.
Okay.
You know how we all operate.
But for Holiday Spectacular, I'm sure they were assuming that a lot of the lights would need to be replaced or something, so this is the budget and maybe the lights were in good shape.
Or someone came in and said, I'm going to donate some lights for you. Or another private funder came in and said, I want to help. And that removed it from their bottom line as a hard cash expense, potentially.
For me, I want to use this information when I'm storing their application next year. You know what I
We
mean?
can provide it.
Yeah.
Provide any kind of information from what transpired last year if it's a repeat.
So, but here's the thing.
I'm just a little lost though. Why do we even have a problem? If they deviated because they didn't need the money, great. Right? If they deviated because they spent more than they don't get any more money. So I'm a little confused why we even are having an issue.
I think sometimes it actually has to do with, this is supposed to be event-related revenues and cash expenses, and sometimes they get confused about in-kind, and they're trying to use in-kind. That doesn't.
The value in-kind is cash.
To qualify the cash from us.
The way the third payment works is basically we have the ability to withhold it if they have much more money than they said they were going to get initially. So it's just, are we still paying them or not? And
So they still got their first and second payment. They just didn't get their final payment, which is, I believe, 20%. They get 40 when they apply for the funding and show, evidence of having an agreement with a space to have the event. They get 40 on the second payment when they prove that the event happened. And then the 20% is the one at the very end. I do want to commend the organizations for being so honest, because we can't really prove it. And we've had no pushback from the people that.
Well, I think maybe the percentage, sorry, go ahead.
If they don't need the money, and the deviation is an indication they did not need the money, then we don't want to be giving them the money.
Right.
We would love to.
It's just a question.
Right, I know it's like 40, 40, and 20. You're saying it's 71% deviation, and they're only withholding 20% of the budget. They did get more cash than they really did.
Yeah, so that's exactly what it is. It's just, what do you guys think the line is of when do we not give them that last payment?
Or should the payment be structured if there's more than a 20% deviation, then maybe it's you only get 50% in advance or something like that. Yeah.
We would have to change the contract.
We can't,
so
we can't change that. That's just a
And that comes to farm to our smaller events.
Yeah, I know.
The bigger events, they have scale. So what line would you draw, right? Based on the life experience of these two cycles, what would be the line you would have drawn?
I think 20%.
Because if we did 20%, then this whole bucket right here, they would have automatically not gotten their, last reimbursement.
And then of the ones that we ultimately approved for payment, the only one that would have gotten was Gasparilla Music Festival. And again, when it's a judgment call, the percentage versus their whole budget, it was sort of, but if we don't want the budget of it's just that deviation, I think 20% is pretty.
But 20% of $100 and 20% of $100,000 are very different numbers.
That's what we've struggled with. That's been our heartburn as we looked at this, because it's very different.
But let's use Gasparilla. So we're giving a $100,000 grant. If that event they have a deviation of 1% over what they anticipated, and they didn't get our last $20,000. Is there great harm? Or is that going to be a problem for them?
I have mixed feelings about this because I think one of the things we talk about is the sustainability of events. If they have I don't think an event's sustainable if they spend all the money they make in one year's event. I think they want to have additional seed money for the following year.
Because when they put their budget and they show how much cash they have on hand, it's going to knock them because they don't have any cash on hand.
I mean, so to me, even if I will support it. I think if we're going to do a deviation, I think we should have a clear cutoff. So I would support that. But I also have the perspective that look, if we agree to give them this funding and the event's more successful, then that gives them more money to reinvest in next year's event. And maybe that's the point where we take it into consideration. But I just think it's way too, we could be sitting here till 3 o'clock talking about.
Right. So let me ask this question. So the challenge you have is that deviate substantially. Substantially is not clearly defined, and therefore you don't have direction on when and when not to execute upon said policy. But what I think I'm hearing is that we're not as much concerned about the total percentage deviation, it's the why, right? Because if they were really effective in going and getting in kind, I don't want to have some kind of punitive clause baked in to disincentivize them from doing that.
Or they got more sponsors.
Yeah, I don't want to disincentivize them from going out and doing what you do for events. And thinking, and then they sit out on their laurels and like, don't worry, we got the county money. We'll just use that as, you know. So I don't want to do anything punitive. Has there been anyone for cause? I guess that's the question. Is if it deviates substantially because of some reason,
well,
that's my concern.
If they don't provide verifiable, if it's in the grant agreement, if they don't provide verifiable attendance figures, like, you know, everything, we're within our rights to not give them that. In fact, one organization recently didn't get the second or third payment. They couldn't provide proof they had. So
that's different.
Right. I don't know that I would call them deviations for cause. They're just different than the number that was initially given.
They just didn't produce, therefore they don't get the money. But if you have somebody who's produced, they've done what they said they were going to do, they did it well. In fact, probably did it so well that they made more money, had better revenue stream, or got better in kind, got better partner pickup.
It's just better weather.
Yeah.
But
in that case,
did you give somebody 40% of the money and then they didn't have the event? And what happened to that 40%, that first payment?
the person, they
got to retain first, even if something should cause an untoward problem where they can no longer have the event, they are allowed to keep that.
They're still allowed.
Yeah.
So then
That should be information.
Because there's not a technical clawback clause for the first.
But we would know that next. We would make sure we would know that next year.
Well, typically, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, but typically I think that is an instance where it's been something, like I'm saying untoward, like something uncontrollable.
Oh, like a hurricane. Okay, got it. Okay, so it's not
like there was a hurricane coming to town and they didn't have the event. Right?
Got it. Okay,
it's
that's
not
totally
usually
different.
like there's been only one instance
like, oh,
I think where that I can name that we're dealing with right now where somebody just appears to not have had the event. Got it. And you didn't lump them next year already.
So our instincts were
Good.
spot on.
Perfect.
Yeah. So again, if you would like to have a threshold of say 20%, but I also don't want to tie your hands, because if you have something that comes forward and that 20% is got an asterisk that has a footnote that explains it away, I don't want to like make it so that you can't have a judgment call.
Well, could you have something like, we encourage you to, thank you for submitting your budget. We encourage you to, solicit for as much in-kind and sponsorship support as you can. If you do submit more than 20%, please let us know so that we can evaluate the funding decision or something like that. Like,
well, it's
like an allowance.
if you want, if you're comfortable with us reviewing the reason for it and making a determination about that, then we can keep it vague.
Well,
and I'm the one that has to sign off on it.
Right.
So
you could put, if final event cash is deviates substantially without verifiable reasons and backup, right? Like therefore it then triggers, like if you had a deviation, then it triggers, you now have to demonstrate to us the why. If the staff's judgment is that the why makes absolute sense, they just knocked it out of the park, they got a ton of in-kind, therefore they're cash this or that, and now if you wanted to add another line that says in the instance of lack of bring it to the board, still be happy to see the bad guys.
we can't change that sentence because it's in the grant agreement.
Got it. Okay.
But if we wanted to go and define what substantially meant, we wouldn't have to change the word. But if you want to leave it as it is and Natalie, if I have a big question, I can call you and say, I'm struggling with this. What do you think?
I agree. I like that it sets in its full discretion. So then there is some conversation that we had. And it looks like you did that. That's why these folks were
I'm assuming you got the reasons from these people before you made these decisions.
And in one case, we were looking at the size of the budget, because it seemed,
could that be if there was something that's too great for you guys to feel comfortable making, could we make an agenda item for us?
They don't have to explain it in the materials they give with the third payment, but we're perfectly fine to ask them for it because we're given that right in the grant.
They should have to
say, we don't understand, why was this so different, and ask for an explanation. We could do that.
You said this was the part that gives you heartburn. Without naming the organization's names, you don't have to, but just tell what was the example an example that gives you heartburn here. Is there an example you feel like, oh, we gave them the money, then they got so much in kind, so they have extra money, they could use that extra money for next year, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but like, so give me an example of a scenario that's heartburn.
I can't think of one right off the bat, but it's everybody has different reasons, and it was just to decide, is this substantial or is this not substantial, and looking at individual circumstances, it was like, but we were trying to keep numbers. Where it gets weird is when one person got it with a 17.14, didn't get it with a 17.14% deviation, and then another organization got it with a 16.
I would say that's my heartburn. It's just that this is mostly historic, and there have been a number of people making this decision over time, staff side, and there's just a wild inconsistency in how it's been applied.
And we want to be consistent.
Yes.
100%.
So if the mood is just.
But I'm assuming the Gasparilla Music Festival at 16.27, they got the funding.
Yes.
The final payment.
But the Taco Festival did it at 17.14.
Taco Festival is this black with
Did not get their last.
So then that's the question of why. So like that's the example. In contrast, why?
I don't remember.
Can I say something?
Yeah, Lisa?
Yes. So the Taco Festival actually didn't get funded on their last payment because we're looking at strictly your cash, what you're putting in on your application, and the cash that you're showing me is what you actually spent. Those are really what was historically looked at for this deviation. Rebecca was the person who was in charge of it when the Taco Fest came along. And she said, no, it's substantially different.
So if you had at that point written them the third check and they had deposited into the bank account, they had no expenses that would then be charged back against those dollars, which is that was the logic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so those money would sit in their bank account, assumably, to roll forward
for next year.
If we trust that they're not just going to pay out bonuses or compensation, and that's the challenge, right? So,
I think that the big thing though is like, now after through this conversation, I have a better understanding of it now than I did at the beginning. But if they're not spending the money, then that is an issue. If they're getting in-kind contributions instead, that's fine. But if they're not spending the dollars, then they're not providing the service they agreed to provide.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's kind of, because they could throw like a very scaled down version of the event. Yeah.
Right. Like,
so maybe we just, so it should be discretionary because they can say, okay, we got the in-kind contributions instead, fine.
Right.
But if they just like do like a scaled down event with half the number of people and didn't hire the musical acts they said they would or whatever.
If they failed to deliver on the promise of the underlying, commitment, that's a cause for not giving it as it pertains back to the deviation. It's going to have to be subjective to some extent.
It could also be if the future benefit that you're concerned about is that we don't want to disincentivize them from having some initiative going out, and we say, okay, then there's that money, then we can put that actually on the application side, and what we can say is, indicate here if in the past, you, for whatever reason, were able to refund or return an unused portion of the previously awarded grant. And in exchange for that, they get further bonus points, if you will, onto this end, because then that gives them an advantage. But we then, as stewards of the money, are saying, well, okay, that's we're not giving out award money here.
I haven't met an organization yet that's going to give their money back.
Well, you know, and that's what I'm saying. I don't want to give it out, but on the flip side, to further incentivize them, I say, well, you get credit, if you will, to some degree in next year's application that gives you this advantage.
Just as if they have a poor closing on it, we're going to hold that over into the next round and recognize that there's concern. So, I mean, it can do both ways. I think my underpinning philosophical attitude is, and why I pissed off the music festival was, if you don't need the money, I don't think we should give you taxpayer dollars. If you didn't spend the money, I don't think we should give you taxpayer dollars. So that's my general, because there's obviously then a higher and better use for those dollars, right?
Right.
Whether it's another event, whether it's another purpose back in GR. So again, I want these dollars to help grow, build, expand, and incentivize. But then there's that fine line for me where if you're able to do it without take taxpayer dollars, please do, so that we can use those dollars for things that we can't do, that other people can't do by themselves.
And reward them in soft
being
dollars.
a good steward.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my, but I don't know that we can solve that with changing a few words. I think that's why it has to be subjective.
We can certainly leave it, and if there's ever a question, I can certainly call you. But I thought you all needed to understand.
Right.
Yeah. I think this was a good conversation to have, because it's all over the map.
But if 20%, without it having kind of a written definition, if 20% is kind of the thoughtful, like kind of line, you know, again, but yet you can go up or down. Like if that's kind of like where you guys internally say, okay, this one's really close. Let's sit down and do another review of this. Let's have a talk. Hey, you know what? We don't have a consensus as a team. We're looking at it historically. This maybe the precedent we've set in the past doesn't really jive with what we're looking at today. Let's call the board chair. Let's see if the board chair wants to elevate this to the full board. Because at the same time, some of us get phone calls after the facts, folks. You know, these are people in our community that we all work with, support, have great relationships with. So if we're getting it wrong and we're doing harm, we would want to fix that. So, you know, but at the same time, I don't want somebody calling and trying to bully staff or being, you know, unprofessional.
Understood. I think, you know, but I really thought it merited a discussion, and the discussion about it has been great.
But general discretion is our direction for you, but knowing that that 20% mark is probably where you need to start doing that little bit finer tooth comb.
Okay, perfect. We just needed a little something.
Okay. Just not to be a dog but if we did do more of a traditional grant process, you're going to have that problem, right? Because they'd be applying.
It's a straight up.
Yeah.
Yep. And so
I do think that's true. And by changing the neighborly application to get what you want, and by having, I think you won't see this as much if you're really getting the information you need to make a decision on the front end with the application. I think it will translate back. This may not be much of an issue.
Let's see what happens with the new 5 extended categories, new weighting, 2011 benchmark, and hopefully a little bit more refined on our understanding of as we're doing the process. If we find that next year in our workshop that we don't find that we're getting where we want to go, then I think in earnest we need to look at a straight up grant process.
You said 2011. 5011?
50, yeah, sorry, 50 and 11, sorry.
Okay, well, this was an excellent meeting. Thank you all for your input. It makes it easier for us to do our job when we know what you're looking for and what will be helpful.
We just want to be good stewards, right? Yeah, that's the goal.
Absolutely. So thank you for your.
Well, if I have to go stand before the commission again, I want to be able to be honest and articulate that we are really truly doing this work to make sure that we're being respectful and responsive to the taxpayers.
Good.
I can get you the video. Yeah.
We good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Turn at 11:48. 12 minutes back.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you. That was doing great. I overestimated my ability to get us done by 11. I had scheduled a call with my attorney. It didn't happen.
happened. I felt like, sorry.
Usually we are. No.
This was a workshop though. It's different. Yeah, this was different. Yeah.
You know, every other meeting.